Good afternoon, class. My name is Master Detective Lance. Today, for our first class session, we are dissecting the Dalimar family. I'm sure for those of you that are new here, you have no idea who the Dalimar family are. They consist of these individuals: Alistair Dalimar, Charles Dalimar, Victor Dalimar, and Abigail Dalimar. Emma Ravenhearst, Rosa Somerset, and her twin daughters, Gwendolyn and Charlotte. To start, we will begin with Alistair, where this all began, and we'll work our way through all the others. I must tell you that this is not going to be an easy task class as your first time here, but it is worth noting that this will definitely explain many things that most of you won't know, because a lot of you have come here from the case file that came out recently. And I realized when I was talking about it that no one had any idea what those people were sent to investigate. So I took it upon myself to make this class to explain, first of all, who these people are. There'll be plenty of classes about other individuals. For today, we will be focusing on the Dalimars.
Alistair Dalimar was born on April 20th, 1567, in Ravenhearst City. We don't know who his parents were, only that he was born in Ravenhearst City. He eventually would grow up and apply to become a locksmithing apprentice at the Gideon Selwyn Locksmithy. There, he would be treated harshly by his master, who often ridiculed him for his work, constantly berated him, and reminded him that he would never amount to anything while simultaneously flaunting his gold and wealth. Though Alistair struggled, he would eventually receive his apprenticeship. He had coldly decided that Selwyn was no longer of use to him, and thus the first murder began. Alistair would bury Gideon alive in the walls of his shop along with all of his gold and wealth, and then he would take over the locksmithy in Gideon's absence. Over time, Alistair would begin to study alchemy and magic. This is something that he would really dive into, and I do not recommend any of you to look into what he looked into, for none of it works. None of it. It is all foolishness. However, Alistair wanted to become the most powerful wizard or sorcerer ever. As time went on, he began to look for a trusted animal familiar, because every wizard had one. So he began to experiment with their animals to find this familiar, and would eventually stumble upon a crow. One very particular crow, whom he would name Thanatos. Alistair would put a piece of his soul into Thanatos, latching his life between him and his crow. As such, if he died, or when he died, he would live on with his crow. More time would pass, and Alistair would hear about the Well of Souls, a secret buried beneath the city of Ravenhearst itself. Alistair would search for this well, for he believed it would unlock the secret of eternal immortality. He would search for an ingredient called a black orchard, in which he would come into contact with Lady Morwen, the wife of Lord Cedric Ravenhearst. She aids Alistair under the agreement that with Alistair's power upon completion of the ritual, he would kill Cedric and allow Morwen to take control of the city. Lady Morwen would bribe the local apothecarian Hedwig to locate a black orchard. She would also bribe a passing theater troupe to mock and insult Cedric upon a mystery play. All this would amount to Alistair indeed obtaining the black orchard, and while Cedric summoned the guards in fury to arrest the theater troupe, Alistair would slip by into the castle and execute the ritual required to obtain his rightful power. You're all still staying with me, right? Don't get lost now. This story only gets more complicated as it goes. On the day of the plan, he is told of a master detective by the name of Ellen Hornbolt, who arrived at the city to arrest those guilty of practicing magic. Upon arriving at Hedwig's apothecary, that he is burning all traces of magic and has backed out of the plan due to the master detective's arrival. Alistair uses Thanatos to throw a smoke bomb into his house, scaring Hedwig out, and allowing Alistair to search the house for the Black Orchard himself. Ellen Hornbolt was a determined, noble, and brave, and steadfast woman. She almost never accepted help from anybody, never gave up on anything. However, unfortunately, this often got in her way. Although her intentions were always good, she would, truly as she would, do rather dastardly things to ensure her triumph with her determination blinding her. This is eventually what undid her and killed her when she believed that she was capable of taking down Alistair Dalimar. Alistair would find the Black Orchard in a secret basement beneath the apothecary. However, he is stopped by Ellen and 2 members of her guard. Alistair is locked up with a guard while Ellen leaves to write a letter to the Queen of England. Despite this predicament, Alistair indeed does escape. However, it is too late to enter the castle and the plan is ruined. In fury, he decides to search for Ellen and take revenge. He finally meets her in the bailiff's office where they duel, resulting, unfortunately, in her defeat. She surrenders and allows herself to be locked up with one of Alistair's complicated locks. Because yes, Alistair himself was known for his complicated locks. As stated before, she would die trying to deal with Alistair. He would evade the guards and leave the city, and using the full extent of his magical power, he wiped Ravenhearst City off the map by sinking it into the sea, just like Atlantis. He cursed all people involved, that being Lord Cedric Ravenhearst, Lady Morwen, and Ellen Hornbolt, to live beneath the sea eternally. Alistair, however, would continue to study magic and alchemy, and research possible sources of immortality. It became his obsession, and he began to believe that eternal immortality was indeed true power. He stopped at nothing to get it. He kept searching until he heard about an object called the Key, which could be used in the Welsh souls to unlock immortality. In 1594, at the age of 138, he decided on traveling to the Orient in search of knowledge and wisdom. He traveled first to the mountains of China, where he asked the seers about the key. After they disappointed him, he traveled to the Karakum Desert and met with the oracles there. However, his questions about mortality disturbed them, and they refused to help him. Eventually, he found himself at the foot of the Himalayas, where he seeks to find the wisdom from local priests. However, they treat him with distrust and gets no information from them. Can you blame him? Students, can you blame him? Really? I know this is a lot of information, but this is his life. Finally, in 1614, at the age of 158, he found out the key was in England the whole time and in the hands of a powerful seer named Madame Fate, whose magical powers were unmatched. Madame Fate, as you know, ran a carnival. She was a seer, and there were a bunch of others involved in that carnival. And we will get to one of them, for one of them is important. During one of Alistair's travels back to England, we found an ancient sect of druids living in New York called Mistwalkers. He learned of their extended lives and put off the ball of fate for a while to study Mistwalkers' powers. He joined the druids and lived among them for a while, using Mistwalker's rural ritual spirit to enhance his lifetime. However, Alistair would continue to seek eternal life and attempt to change the ritual, thus creating the blood ritual, which involves the sacrificed child of the forest and 2 blood relatives. The other Mistwalkers learned of this and banished him. Upon fleeing, he left behind his daughter Lily, who was indoctrinated into the Mistwalkers. Now, the daughter of the forest does indeed sound familiar. If you remember Dire Grove and the Celtic story behind it, the fact that they had to sacrifice one of their own to shut the Banshee and the Gate of Frost. The same idea was used here in this too. You can find a reference to this in the case of Last Resort. We don't really count the stories that have come from a certain studio as canon, but they are part of this canon, so therefore we have to mention them. Lily, however, on the other hand, he would meet Samuel Crawford and eventually would marry him, and eventually a few years later would die at the hands of her own father, unfortunately. Around 1870, Alistair meets Abigail O'Malley. She would become Charles Dalimar's mother, mainly because she fell in love with Alistair, although he saw Abigail as more of a ticket to the carnival and would feign feelings for her, and eventually they would get married. She would become pregnant with Alistair's child. Thanks to their relationship, Alistair is able to get a job at Fate's Carnival, and Madame Fate would continue her nomadic movement as sleight-of-hand magicians, and Madame Fate herself would continue to become a seer. Alistair would have a mental breakdown upon reaching the carnival. He had been searching for their key. The proximity was too much to handle. His facade as a magician failed, and would end up in the local Manchester asylum, and he would be put into the care of Dr. Robert Lanswiller. It is from here we will deviate from Alistair's tale and open about Charles. Will make sense once we do. Charles Nathaniel Dalimar was born in 1873 to Abigail Dalimar in the Blackpool Temperance Hospital. He would never see his father when he was born. For as you all know, his father was currently in the asylum. He would be at home being abused by his mother Abigail, torturing him, making him do terrible chores, forcing him to live in a cupboard under the stairs, or in the basement in a cage. He would have to cut her toenails.
Charles, come clip my nails! Watch it! Ow! Watch it! Watch it! Be careful! Watch it!
Trim her nose hairs.
Charles! Get in here and trim my hairs! Where have you been? Charles! Come pop my pimples! Get to it, boy! Feels so good.
And would not have to use a spankotronic. Yes, they had a machine called the spankotronic, which was used to spank Charles with. Or Abigail, while working at Madame Fate's carnival, was known as the fattest lady alive. She was so obese she could barely move. Charles would be obsessed with making locks. He would be always making locks. As his father before him, he too became pretty good at putting together locks. It made him feel safe. He was so obsessed that at the age of 11, he was taken to the same asylum under the same care of Dr. Robert Lanswiller as his father in the Provincial Lunatic Asylum. There, Charles would be for 10 years. Alistair would be next door to him, whispering to Charles through Thanatos. His father would teach Charles how to create locks that could bind a person's soul, and then he would find a newspaper article upon reading the arrival of Emma Ravenhearst in Blackpool. He would use liquid nitrogen from the asylum's laboratory to break out and escape through the gully, escaping at the age of 21 and revisiting his mother, in which he would make an apple pie with a bomb in it and blew her to pieces.
Get to it, boy! Ow!
Now we're going to deviate from Charles for a little bit, and we're going to have a look at Emma Ravenhearst's journal. This journal is extremely important for a certain story that we will mention later. Completely and utterly abolishes this journal. However, this journal is as canon as they come. We will have someone come in and read the journal for us, since we do not have the real Emma Ravenhearst to read her own journal. So if our guest could come in and be careful with the journal, it is extremely old. It is a very priceless artifact.
Entry the 1st of August 24th, 1894. My new life. Today I finally made my arrival in Blackpool, England. I already miss my friends and family back home in Iowa, but I always swore that after my final year at the Teachers College I would spread my wings and see more of this glorious world. I have arranged boarding with the headmistress under whom I shall apprentice in exchange for menial household chores. I'm not much of an asset in the kitchen. With any luck at all my modicum of culinary proficiency shall suffice. September 5, 1894. The diminutive community is not exactly teeming with activity, but I'm anxious to attend the annual autumn dance this Friday evening. Entry 2. September 10, 1894. An intriguing man. The autumn formal was absolutely what my homesick heart required. Any time is an occasion for dance, as my father is one to proclaim. I felt at home for the first time since my arrival in England. This evening's revelry also brought an encounter with a dashing young man by the name of Charles Dalimar. An exceptionally handsome fellow, this one. I do believe he requested my hand for the better half of the gala. When not dancing about like two of my young students, we were engrossed in conversations, both enthralling and mundane. I must have made quite an impression, for his eyes did not long take leave of mine. Entry 3. February 5, 1895. Courtship and proposal. For many months now my days have been spent educating my students' young minds, while my evenings belong to my wonderful Charles. He often steals me from my chores, but the headmistress does not seem to mind. March 14, 1895. After a delightful carriage ride this evening, Charles amazed me by dropping to one knee and producing a most beautiful engagement ring. This is the moment in life for which every young woman waits, a wealthy, handsome man asking for her hand in marriage. As Charles knelt before me, his request hanging in the air, I felt my breath catch. Entry 4. March 16, 1895. Indecision. I have avoided Charles these past days while I give his proposal its due measure of contemplation. I've awaited this experience for as long as I can remember, and I find myself wondering how different my life might become. March 17, 1895. After shedding many a tear, I made up my mind to decline Charles' proposal. It's so difficult to be certain that I've made the correct decision, yet I feel my adult life is just now beginning to unfold. March 18, 1895. The delay of my reply, coupled with my melancholy demeanor, must surely have wounded Charles this day. I have denied that which he has so graciously offered. Entry 5. April 3, 1895. A friend returns. Charles took my refusal with great disappointment, and I fear it to be the end of our friendship. While I feel not yet prepared for the bonds of marriage, it pains my heart to wound him so. Have I made the correct decision?
Before we get too swept up in this little drama, let's all remember that Charles blew up his mother into pieces. And let's all remember that he was madly obsessed with Emma, as stated earlier. So what can we gather so far from both Alistair and Charles Dalimar, you may ask? We can gather that both of these people, both of these individuals, both desired control and power. They both desired different things. Alistair desired immortality. Charles desired beauty. Both had a lust for two different things, one being immortality, the other being beauty. Alistair went mad over the power of the key. Charles went mad over the beauty of Emma. You could say that the beast found his beauty.
April 5, 1895. After more than 2 weeks' absence, I received a welcome visitor. Charles surprised me after school today with a bouquet of roses in front of a most mischievous grin. I was overjoyed to see him and took comfort in knowing he appreciated my decision. Charles excitedly delivered news of his purchase of a large acreage on a remote periphery of the township. He has secured funding to construct a beautiful home. Entry 6. May 14, 1895. Tragedy. A dark cloud of mourning has befallen the town. A carpenter by the name of Frank Williams fell to his death this very morning. Dropped from the topmost scaffolding on Charles Dalimar's future home, to be quite specific. May 16, 1895. Today I accompanied Charles to the funeral of the poor man whose life was lost at the foot of his new home. Charles remained quiet and sullen during the proceedings. I was deeply saddened to learn that the deceased left behind a young wife and 2 children. As the pallbearers lowered the coffin into the ground, Charles leaned near and whispered, "Perhaps I am a cursed man, meant to reside alone within my bedeviled manor." Entry 7. May 23, 1895. News from home. I received an unfortunate letter from home. My father is ill. Mother did not write of the details, but she requested that I return to Iowa as quickly as is reasonably possible. My sadness and apprehension threaten to overwhelm me, but I am doing my best to keep that darkness at bay for now. I will speak with the headmistress before I make arrangements for travel. I must also inform Charles that I will be taking leave of England for a spell, if not for good. It will sadden me a great deal to leave my new friends behind, but I'm quite frantic with concern for my father. It seems that unlucky events have been surrounding me of late. Entry 8. May 24, 1895. I must return home. The headmistress was quite compassionate regarding my situation. She offered to pack my belongings, but I could not let her. She has already done so much, gone far beyond what her duties dictate. Charles did not react in such a manner. I informed him that I must leave, that my father is ill and my family requires my presence. He is greatly upset. He nearly went into a tirade. He made an attempt to flatter me, I believe, with the explanation that his new home would be named in my honor. I must wonder if he is attempting to secure my return to England, to him, and his home. I must prepare my departure and cannot think of such things right now.
As you've likely noticed, Charles's obsessive behavior is already showing and being able to be seen through the cracks. What sane person would build a manor and name it after the person that they're absolutely crazy over? A person would even go as far as to stop a poor lady from going back home to help her father in his direst of times. Only someone as obsessive as this man was. However, as you'll know, what Charles did with his mother and blowing her to pieces was nothing compared to what he would do with this poor soul, and those that he would bring in after her.
Entry 9. June 1, 1895. I am feeling unwell and retired shortly after dinner this evening. I'm certain that my malaise is the product of sad goodbyes and the stress of leaving England so abruptly. It's probably apprehension regarding my father's condition. June 2, 1895. The ship upon which I booked passage to New York has already departed without me. I've contracted a high fever and find it difficult to stand for even short periods of time without intense vertigo. Concern for my father's health has gained a friend in my fear for my own well-being. Charles has graciously offered boarding and attendance within his newly completed manor until I am well enough to make the long journey home. Entry 10. June 10, 1895. Unusual behavior. While my malady goes undiagnosed, I am left to search medical encyclopedias for comparable symptoms. Although many have passed from yellow fever, I am thankfully not experiencing evidence to its presence. Charles takes good care of me, but lately has become rather withdrawn. I often hear peculiar sounds from his workshop and he appears to be keeping odd hours. My accommodations are pleasant and I spend the greater part of my day resting in hopes of regaining my strength. When possible, I enjoy exploring this wonderful, stately manor. Charles has built a most beautiful, albeit cluttered, home. He appears to take great pride in procuring an absolute hoard of varied non-essentials. Entry the 11th of June 13, 1895. Doctor visit. I grow weaker with each day's passing, and last night took a turn for the worse. I am now experiencing blackouts and find it difficult to keep my mind focused. My body seems almost incapable of regulating temperature. June 15, 1895. The local physician arrived again this morning and ran his routine array of probing and reviewing my failing condition. I am exhausted with the endless parade of horse pills and repulsive elixirs I must ingest in hopes of restraining my symptoms. Charles, too, has become exceedingly fatigued with the burden of my care and has suggested we take hire of a live-in nursemaid to provide assistance. I am fortunate to have such a kindly friend. Entry 12. June 21, 1895. Strange behavior. Charles' absence has become increasingly commonplace. Although he benevolently tends to me, he is often away from the house for extended periods and returns with the most unusual oddities. One such example is the ever-expanding library on the floor above my quarters. He has taken up an affinity for compiling an extensive assortment of books and manuals whose subject matter would chill your very heart. Great tomes on topics including dark magic, voodoo, and witchcraft have exceeded shelf space and must be piled waist-high. I was aware of Charles' penchant for the written word, yet his theme of choice is most unsettling. Entry 13. July 13, 1895. Feverish dream. I cannot sleep. Each time I do, something wakes me and I feel chilled. This night it was a terrible dream, a nightmare that was seemingly quite real, which made my blood pump so that I could not rest. I was here in this room, sitting in my wheelchair. I looked down to see myself wearing a gown of white, beautifully made of lace and satin. It took a moment to recognize that it was a wedding dress. I felt a paralysis throughout my body as I sat, frozen in this gown. My soaring temperature is causing many such frightening nightmares. Also, I am quite concerned that I have yet to receive further communication from home. My father's health weighs greatly on my mind. Entry 14th. July 14, 1895. Welcome company. Today brought the arrival of a nurse named Rose Somerset. Charles insists on using the old term matron, but I prefer to think that she is more of a maid who will be checking my health in addition to keeping up the house. Regardless of the titular formalities, I am very pleased and excited for Rose's company. Charles is still very distracted, although I have not idea to what he does with his time these days. But, now I can spend time with this kind woman. She might just bring a bit of light into my life, which has been lacking as my health has dwindled. My affliction made it difficult to move about, so I am now confined to do so with the help of a wheelchair.
We shall deviate slightly from Emma's diary for a moment and give you some backstory on Emma Somerset. Emma Somerset, we don't know when she was born. Exactly. All we know is that at some point she married into the Somerset family with Reginald Somerset, and then moved into Blackpool with her husband. Eventually, she would be hired after taking an advertisement of Emma Ravenhearst on the 14th of July, 1895, as you saw in that journal. Rose was described as a loving and caring woman who would bring life and light to people's dark world. There will be more mentioned on Rosa. For now, we will stop here and continue with the journal.
Entry 15. August 2nd, 1895. The dress. Rose has been an amazing blessing, and for all the care she has given me, I am most thankful for the much-needed companionship. She too has noticed the odd behavior that Charles has been exhibiting. This afternoon, Rose posed a rather unexpected question by asking if Charles had ever previously wed. I explained he had not, and made clear his intentions towards me. Curiously, I questioned why she should ask, and she recounted coming across a wedding gown while cleaning the wardrobe upstairs. She brought me the gown and I felt my heart arrest when I laid eyes upon it. She displayed the very same dress from my nightmare some days ago.
So, have any of you in class picked it up yet? The pattern. Any of you picked it up yet? Anybody noticed? Anybody? Raise your hand if you have. Not you, Sophia, in the back. Put your hand down. And don't whisper to the students. They have to use their critical thinking and figure it out. Emma has been through a lot, as you've noticed in this journal. But if you're paying attention, you'll pick up on things. I will not underline things just yet. However, I will in a moment. After this next entry is read, I will underline certain things. And if any of you can come to the same conclusion I came to when I read this journal before the big reveal, then you are not that far from being a master detective yourself.
Entry 16. August 3rd, 1895. Hidden correspondence. Fever weakens me such that I have difficulty focusing my vision. My hands have begun to convulse and I have great difficulty holding, let alone updating, this very journal. Rose often records my thoughts as I dictate. After discovering the dress, and Rose's increasing anxiety towards Charles, we have agreed to hide my diary. I fear this anxiety may be quite well-founded, however, with our newest finding. Charles has secretly adorned an upstairs bedroom with all the trappings of a nursery, including a crib. Upon inspection, the crib contained unopened correspondence from my family in the United States. I am scared for my very life.
Your hands are so weak you can barely hold a pen. Your vision is so bad you can barely focus it. You can barely walk, so you use a wheelchair. Barely know when is reality or when you are dreaming. You barely can function as a human being. So what do you think, class? Allow me to point to you different moments or highlights that'll give you the key to what you're needing to know here. The very first mention of something going wrong was back in the 9th entry of this journal, on the 1st of June, where she was feeling unwell. And then from there it just descended. The highlights, if you pay attention in these entries. However, I'm not going to give it away, because this next entry will answer it for me. However, for those of you that figured it out, You'll get an A+. It's okay if you didn't figure out, because that's what this class is for, to educate you. Just how evil the Dalimar family is as a whole, and how these innocent people did not deserve all of this tragedy and cruelty that came upon them.
Entry 17. August 4th, 1895. Poison. I'm not sure what is happening. It takes all of my energy to sit and write here. Rose claims I have been falling in and out of consciousness at the most odd times. I have yet to feel any better, and now we know why. Rose was tidying the house and she saw Charles in the kitchen. He had just finished preparing my dinner, all he does anymore after spending his time affixing random items to doors inside the house. She swears she saw a bottle in his pocket labeled phosphorus white. At first she thought it part of his unusual contraptions, but we have since found it to be a key ingredient in poison. Is Charles trying to poison me? Entry 18. August 5th, 1895. We must flee. Is Charles trying to murder me? Am I absurd to ask myself such a question? I have felt so incredibly terrible, and I am rarely sure if I am awake or dreaming any longer. Can I trust myself? Rose believes she is correct. She says he has been keeping me here by making me sick. Charles has slowly fallen into his own delusional sickness. How could I have trusted him? We must leave. It's very clear his madness will take our lives if we stay. Escape from this cursed home where I have known nothing but illness and fear. Charles will kill us if we do not flee this place at once. Entry 19. August 6, 1895. Escape. Rose is packing my few belongings as I use what little strength I have remaining to record the events transpiring around us. Charles is out of the manor, for how long, we know not, so we must make haste. We have come to the conclusion that Charles' madness has fully consumed his mind. He moves about in an erratic fashion, speaking almost incomprehensible nonsense. Rose believes those odd devices he builds on the doors to be locks. He wants to keep me with him forever. I am so weak, but must break free from this place. Why would he?
Charles would murder Emma Ravenhearst, catching her attempting to flee. Rose would be found too, and kidnapped. Now, if there's one thing I forgot to mention, and I did it on purpose, is that Rosa did indeed have two twin daughters, as I mentioned in the introduction of this class, Gwendolyn and Charlotte. We do not know whether Reginald or Charles are their parents. All we know is that Charles kidnapped them, as well as Rose, and brought them down to an underground complex, complete with a salon, supply store, and other places. Charles would have built this place to keep, as Emma said, them there forever. The mention of the locks on the doors and everywhere else, if you remember correctly, Charles was taught by Alistair Dalimar in the creation of soul locks. As such, Emma Ravenhearst would never be able to escape the manor, even in death. Her soul would be trapped there, along with eventually Rosa Somerset and her twin daughters, for they would die too with her. Charles would have his way with her eventually, and Victor would be born. Victor would terrorize his twin sisters, and would be seen as Charles's favorite. The machine that they would build together, Victor and Charles, the soul machine. We're going to deviate from Rosa now, and Somerset twins, and talk a little bit about Victor. Victor was born, we don't know when. He grew up in the Ravenhearst Manor. He never went to a public school. However, we presume he was taught by his father Charles in the basics of knowledge, in a school built underground beneath Ravenhearst Manor. Charles, however, wanted to become immortal just like his father before him, so that he could be with his family forever. As such, Charles would use a soul device to allow him to live for a good 110 years to be precise. Charles would sustain himself in the soul machine, a device used to drain the souls of the Dalimars, that being Emma, Rose, Gwendolyn, and Charlotte. However, it wouldn't be until a long century later that the Master Detective would find the Ravenhearst Manor and release not just Emma, Rosa, and her twin daughters, but the Master Detective would also release Charles Dalimar, who furiously would chase the detective out of the house but not before the Master Detective managed to free Emma, Rosa, Gwendolyn, and Charlotte.
Entry 20. Today. My only hope. I have watched you move about this dark place for some time now, inspecting various items around the house. You carry what remains of my diary. We were both lost long ago and you must listen, for there is little time. I have been trapped here for so long and you are my only hope to break free of this horrible place. Please listen and do as I say before he returns. He keeps me in the cellar, but you must look beyond the brick and mortar. The last locked door requires 7 skeleton keys which are hidden throughout the house. Without your help, I can never go home. Emma Ravenhearst.
Unfortunately, Charles would bring them back using the soul device, and it was not until the Master Detective destroyed the soul device that Charles again would be set back. However, Victor Dalimar would use a time machine to go back in time to find the soul of his father, in which he would manage to successfully bring back his father, who in turn would start kidnapping people in order to use another soul machine that he created with help of Victor to lure the Master Detective back to Ravenhearst.
Welcome back, Detective. I can't wait to show you what I've been working on. After you destroyed my home and family, my good son Victor took it upon himself to travel back in time and begin work on my greatest creation. With the souls of my loved ones forever out of reach, I needed you to lure them back home. I knew you couldn't resist returning to torment me. Time and again, you've misunderstood my intentions. That's why I built this prison for you, so that you may better understand. You can scarcely imagine it, Detective. Healing someone, only to later pluck the final petal from their once lovely bloom. I want you to know what it feels like to give and take life. Look at my pretty maids all in a row. Touch their bellies, make them grow. Pump them up, all nice and neat. Earn yourself a delicious treat. Isn't she lovely, Detective? The miracle of birth is something I want you to experience. If you wish to live, you must first give life to me. This is where I was taught my place in life. This is where I learned pain and fear. How could you understand without knowing how that feels?
The Master Detective would circumvene this underground labyrinth, successfully seeing all of Charles's life and how he sees his life as. And to the end of it, thinking that the Master Detective finally understood why he was doing what he was doing, he and Victor do a celebration of sorts, calling it a family reunion. However, the Master Detective manages to set free the now living remnants of the Dalimar family, and in the process, during self-destruct sequence, Charles and Victor die together, once and for all. And they are dead, by the way, class. I want you to notice this. Take note of this. They died. Their lust for immortality, their lust for beauty, their lust for imprisoning innocent individuals who did not deserve the fate that they were given, their desire for control, their desire for containing a family that would never abandon, never leave. Sure, Charles was abused when he was young, horribly by his mother. His mother, however, was grieving at the time because his father was in an asylum. However, while the abuse is inexcusable, we can sympathize with the fact that it can be very difficult sometimes to heal from such events. Charles could have made a choice to not be like his abusers. Charles could have been a much better person, but instead the monster that he became would show that indeed he is truly evil, just as his father before him, who also lusted after power. Speaking of his father, we can now return to his father, mainly because we're going to pick up and read some more. Alistair would eventually break out of the asylum. He would return to Dire Grove during the 90s. Alistair would lure Derek and nearly unalives him, leading him out to the snow. Derek would be found practically on his deathbed. He would be found. Mistwalkers would refuse to heal him. He made a secret pact with the Mistwalkers, leaving home forever and becoming a Mistwalker, so as long as his brother was healed. Derek would be healed, and by the time his father found out, it was too late. His father would dislike and hate the Mistwalkers for a long time. Alistair would destroy Peter's memory, whereas Derek would grow up brotherless with his bitter father, would become a hunter, and believed the Mistwalkers were pure evil. Alistair's plan working, the two blood relatives, one attuned with nature and one opposing it, had finally come to fruition. It would take years, though, for the opposites to happen. Content with what he had done at Dire Grove, Alistair would return to Fate's carnival, attempt to seize the ball of fate from Madame Fate. Madame Fate would refuse and would seal Alistair trapped for decades. For 7 years, Alistair would remain in that ball, trapped. Eventually, the curse would fade and weaken, allowing Alistair to summon Thanatos. He would have Thanatos lure the Master Detective to the remains of Fate's carnival. While trapped in the ball of fate, while the detective is on their way, Alistair uses his extremely weakened powers to graffiti the carnival and summon spirits of long-deceased carnival workers to torment them. Eventually, Alistair's powers were noticed, but they were noted as anomalous activities. Thanatos would follow and monitor the detective around the carnival until they finally made their way to Man of Fate's caravan and unlocked the Ball of Fate without realizing that Alistair Dalimar was trapped. Moments after being released from his imprisonment, Alistair sends Mr. Detective to the Tomb of Men of Fate so he can use his powers without restriction. With Mr. Detective dealt with passively, Dalimar uses the full extent of his power to alter the ruined carnival into his own personal twisted reality called Alistair's Sanctorium, where he revives several more carnival workers and given them each the chance to help him. Those that refused were tortured and some killed at Alistair's hand. He constructed a tower using dark magic and planned to construct an indestructible automaton capable of containing his soul so he may live eternally. It would be powered by a machine built within the Ferris wheel. He would hire a man named Dr. Goodwill to work on the automaton, while other carnival workers that he had taken inside, such as Malaton, Emberton, and Dante Camillo, guard the tower. Alistair would learn of the Master Detective's return to the carnival with the aid of Madame Fate, and thus he prepares a trap for her. He creates a false book of black magic and places it at the bottom of his personal aviary. He finds his assistant subdued and the automaton has been deactivated. He takes the aviary and finds Mr. Detective attempting to destroy the book. Alistair coyly explains that it is a fake and reveals the real Black Diary, which was hidden long ago before blowing apart the aviary, thinking that the Master Detective would fall to their death in the explosion. However, he would find Mr. Detective still alright and holding the dark diary, much to Alistair's surprise. The Master Detective would stab the book with the badge, which destroys Alistair and releases the curse upon the carnival. Thanatos would survive, however, and would flee back to Dire Grove. There also, apparently, as is Alistair's habit, left a piece of its soul here in Dire Grove, would use that to regain his body once more. He would stalk his grandson, eventually being noticed by a hunter named Ted. When catching Derek alone, he puts him under a spell and takes full control of him. He would make his grandson kidnap the child of the forest and send a letter to the Mistwalkers demanding the return of Peter. However, the letter would never find its way into the Mistwalkers' hands, and the disappearance of the child angers the Keeper Spirit, who curses Dargrove into everlasting winter. The Master Detective is summoned, and they would go to Dargrove, investigating and resolving the feud. Unfortunately, Alistair is trying to complete the blood ritual, which we all know about. However, the spell is broken when Peter reveals himself to be Derek. Alistair, in anger, reveals himself to the Mistwalkers and attacks Dargrove, cursing the forest with totems and black smoke. He takes Derek and Peter and plans to attack the Keeper of the Forest and take the children himself to finally execute the blood ritual and grant himself immortality. However, his plans are thwarted by the Master Detective, who is aided by the Keeper Spirit to survive Alistair's reality, altering curses upon Dire Grove. Derek and Peter are saved, and an ancient altar is used for the blood ritual. Alistair is obliterated by the full power of the altar, and then the altar is blown up to ensure Alistair doesn't return and attempt to use the blood ritual ever again. Thanatos, however, is still alive, and as such, so is Alistair. Acting as a vessel, Thanatos would take the Ball of Fate and travel back to Blackpool, where he would find Alistair's last surviving relatives, Gwendolyn and Charlotte. We don't know how Gwendolyn and Charlotte acclimated to modern society. All we know is that Alistair would visit them eventually, connecting to them via his raven, Thanatos. I am certain, due to the trauma, due to other events, that somehow he was able to both manipulate and appeal to the madness within them, and thus allured them into rebuilding Ravenhearst Manor and reviving him as well. Benedict Cadwell would be controlled by Thanatos, and Gwendolyn would seduce and marry him. She would take advantage of his skills as an architect, and he would rebuild the manor and construct the dreadful Collector, which terrified Benedict. The Collector being a device to collect its souls, essentially. Gwendolyn and Charlotte would also be involved in kidnapping and unaliving multiple workers who helped build the estate, which was disguised as a museum to honor Ravenhearst's history. He also used a lighthouse to mislead ships, causing them to crash. After they would climb aboard and slaughter all passengers, bringing their bodies to the collector. Lena Cadwell, who tried to uncloak the mysteries surrounding the Ravenhearst Manor, was also killed by Gwendolyn. Lena hoped for more clues in the lighthouse, but was taken by surprise by Gwendolyn, and she was pushed down the lighthouse. They would find out the master detective trying to help Benedict return to sanity, and they would unalive him. Alistair would regain his body via the collector, the twins assisting him in the unlocking ritual to make him immortal. However, they were knocked out by the master detective, who overloaded the machine, causing the collector to combust and the ball of fate to shatter. Charlotte, however, broke into the Manchester Lunatic Asylum, retrieved a shard of the ball of fate. She would set off a riot and threatened to torture and kill the detective. However, the master detective would escape her constraints and locked Charlotte in a storage room. She would manage to call Thanatos and gave him a shard from the Ball of Fate. Gwendolyn and Alistair would patiently wait next to the ruins of the recently destroyed Ravenhearst Manor. Thanatos would tell Alistair what happened to Charlotte and called her a failure. Charlotte said that she wouldn't be a failure to Alistair moments before Alistair brought down a dagger upon her. Its blood was used to bring Ravenhearst City back from the waves. Charlotte would break free of the asylum, learned of her sister's death. She would collect Gwendolyn's body, which she would stuff into a suitcase. Then she would find Victor, who had used a time machine to reach her, and Victor would take her to 2019. There she would be stuck with Victor in Hotel Victory. However, thanks to the master detective, timelines would be fixed, and Charlotte would be returned back to 2015, where we have no idea what happened. As for Alistair, we know that raising Ravenhearst City from the sea, Lady Morrowind meets Alistair in what remains of the high street, and she discusses Alistair's treachery. As Sea Mind goes off and disrupts the conversation, Alistair heads off towards the Ravenhearst Castle to find the Well of Souls. Thanatos tells Alistair of the detective's arrival and to expect them. This does not make Alistair cease. He finds Morrowind again at the entrance to the Well of Souls. She warns him the Lord Ravenhearst has made him way down into the caverns also. Alistair follows Cedric, and Lady Morrowind is shortly unalived at the hands of the Master Detective. Alistair would meet with Lord Cedric Ravenhearst at the Well of Souls. Cedric expects to defeat him, however, Alistair has his hands on the Ball of Fate, that being the key. The limitless souls are transferred to the Ball of Fate. However, Ellen Hornbolt appears and attacks Alistair. He retaliates with a burst of energy, knocking her unconscious. Cedric takes this chance, and they both struggle with the ball. The Master Detective observes this fight, and while both Cedric and Alistair are distracted, uses a staff of oscillations to shatter the cavern ceiling above them. Rockfall would knock both Alistair and Cedric and the Ball of Fate into the well. Cedric and Alistair would be fused to the Ball of Fate, making a strange double entity. Cedric attempts to overpower Alistair, but fails. Alistair decides they should work together for the moment to defeat the common enemy. However, the Master Detective again takes the Ball of Oscillations once more and stabs the Ball of Fate, destroying it. Thus, the Ball of Fate is destroyed, releasing all the souls from the well into the afterlife, including Alistair. Thanatos attempts to flee, but is crushed by falling debris. Thus, Alistair's long reign of terror ends with the death of Thanatos. So, what can we conclude from all of this? We can conclude that the entire Dalimar family, except for Rosa Somerset and Emma Ravenhearst, were completely and utterly evil. Alistair's lust for mortality, for power, for preeminence, for supreme supremacy, sent him on a mad hunt to destroy many lives and to attempt something that he did not deserve to have. Charles lusted over beauty and imprisoned his own family in a manner, both in life and in death, to keep them forever, so that he would feel their love forever. Fortunately, this also would lead to his own demise. I told you at the beginning of this that all of this magic stuff does not work. It is a fool's errand. And now I am going to make that point again with a final point. They all died, my dear class. They all are dead now. However, due to a certain studio's antics, we now have to look upon one other thing that happened before we close this class, and you are sent and dismissed. In a certain store, it is reported that a robot was designed to poison Emma Ravenhearst instead of Charles. A redemption arc was given to Charles' detective spirit, inhibiting Charles's body and having him undo everything that he did, from the building of the Ravenhearst Manor to allowing Emma Ravenhearst to escape. However, this does not excuse all of the evil that Charles did, as you have seen here. Charles did a lot of evil. But the biggest question that remains is, why is it Emma and Rosa that are able to escape, but not Charles's mother? Why doesn't she not get the same treatment? So what can we conclude from all of this? Charles, Alistair, and his son after him, Victor, and his two half-sisters, Gwendolyn and Charlotte, each became evil in their own right, whether through persuasion or through manipulation, or for a lust in the desire for immortality and the isolation to control the love of a family. Either way, we can conclude that this family is evil, the only innocents dashed to pieces by their own doing. Gwendolyn and Charlotte could have said no to Alistair. They could have decided not to continue the cycle of evil. However, I believe due to the psychological damage, terror of the man called Charles, that there was a madness within them that was manipulated by Alistair. In turn, they also became evil. It is unfortunate. But yes, let us remember that it was not a robot that poisoned Emma Ravenhearst. It was Charles. Emma Ravenhearst herself says so. Rosa Somerset herself says so. Charles does not deserve a redemption arc, and neither does Alistair, or any of the Dalimar family for that matter. Alistair, Charles, Victor, Gwendolyn, and Charlotte are all evil. Each could have stopped the perpetual cycle, and each did not. The only two people in this entire narrative who did any good at the end of all this were Emma Ravenhearst and Rosa Somerset, two innocent individuals who did not deserve the fate that befell them. Fortunately for them, their souls would rest in peace, not knowing that their descendants would cause such great grief. However, they may rest knowing that they will no longer have to suffer at the hands of such vile individuals. With that said, we are done here, class. This has been a lot, I know. There's a lot of information, a lot of things. Oh, and one random fact for you all. Did you know that Phineas Crown is Charles's grandfather? Yeah, I didn't know that either, but he is. But that's another story from another time. Phineas Crown is getting his own class, along with the Lanston family. That's going to be its own story, but for now, that is all. You are all dismissed. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section.